Welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of our scary stories. I'm your host, walking with you along the chilling corridors of fear, leading you into the heart of the unknown. Tonight, we journey into a terrifying realm, a world undone by humanity's reckless ambition. When science challenges death, what monstrous reality awaits us? So, turn down the lights, let the shadows dance, and let your imagination run wild as we step into a tale where death is not the end, but the beginning of a horrifying nightmare. The world was in ruins. Beyond the cold glass windows of his secluded laboratory, Dr. Adler could see the waning orange glow of the sun, its faint light failing to penetrate the heavy shroud of gray clouds. The deserted streets outside were once teeming with life, but now only echoed with the whispers of an unseen virus. The pandemic had tightened its cold grip around humanity's throat, leaving the world gasping for breath. The laboratory was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Every inch of its sterile, white surface gleamed with a fanatical cleanliness that hinted at Dr. Adler's desperate bid for control. Bottles of antiseptic fluid stood like soldiers at the front lines of a losing war. Adler moved among his machinery, eyes scanning a flurry of glowing screens, fingers dancing over the keys with a practiced ease. The room hummed with the sound of whirling machines, their cyclical drone a haunting melody of impending doom. Sweat trickled down Adler's forehead, tracing a cold line down the contours of his worried face. The scent of sterilized metal and antiseptic hung heavily in the room, punctuated by the faint, acrid hint of burnt coffee coming from a neglected mug. Underneath his lab coat, Adler's heart pounded like a furious drummer. He was a tall man, once robust and full of life, now reduced to a gaunt figure by the relentless weeks of ceaseless work. His eyes, bright blue, held a glimmer of mad hope. They darted to a photograph pinned on a corkboard, a woman radiant and full of life, her smile a cruel reminder of the world that was now lost. He could almost hear the soft whisper of her laughter, the delicate scent of her hair. "Madeline," he whispered, his voice cracking. His grief was a living entity in the room, a silent specter that echoed in his hollow words. Sighing heavily, Adler turned back to his work. On his steel table lay a petri dish containing a violet liquid, an experimental drug he named the Lazarus Strain. It shimmered under the fluorescent lights, a sliver of violet against the monotonous white. He extracted a small dose with a pipette, his hand steady despite the storm of dread in his heart. In a sealed chamber lay a small white lab rat, lifeless for hours. He injected the Lazarus Strain and watched. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence in the room seemed to echo the stillness of death. Adler clenched his jaw, his eyes never leaving the rat. And then, a flicker of movement. The rat twitched, its body convulsing in a grotesque dance of life and death. Then, slowly, its beady eyes blinked open. A triumphant smile curled Adler's lips, a bitter victory in the face of an invisible enemy. But within his heart, a cold dread solidified. In his quest for life, he had defied the natural law. Yet, he was too blinded by hope to see the horrifying truth of his actions. Little did he know that the line between savior and destroyer was about to blur. His triumph was humanity's impending nightmare. The first page of a terror tale had been turned. The Lazarus Strain had come alive. Inside the quiet isolation of his laboratory, Dr. Adler marveled at the resurrected rat. It moved with an uncanny vigor, a small testament to the wonder he had unlocked, a resurrection wrapped in violet liquid. The Lazarus Strain was alive, and with it, hope bloomed within the sterile white walls of the lab. Outside, the world still moaned under the weight of the relentless pandemic. The fallen sun gave way to a moon that hung like a pallid specter in the smoky sky. Its weak light painted the deserted streets with a monochrome palette, each shadow a testament to the life that once flourished there. News of Adler's miraculous breakthrough traveled fast, borne on the wings of desperate hope. Television screens flickered with images of him holding the once dead rat, now a symbol of resurrection. Anxious families watched from their barricaded homes, their fear-laden hearts daring to beat with a rhythm of hope. Adler stood in the center of this storm, his sorrow-drenched eyes brimming with determination. When approached by a representative of the world's governing body, he shared the blueprint of his miracle drug without a moment's hesitation. The Lazarus Strain was no longer confined within his lab. It became the world's beacon, its ray of hope piercing the fog of despair. Production began in full force. Pharmaceutical factories, once abandoned in the wake of the pandemic, roared back to life. The acrid smell of chemicals replaced the stale odor of neglect. A Lazarus strain flowed through assembly lines, filled countless vials, and was dispatched to every corner of the globe. Families, torn apart by the invisible enemy, reunited with their loved ones. The world echoed with sighs of relief and cries of joy. The Lazarus strain had breathed life back into a dying world. But with each resurrection, an unseen chaos began to stir, a monstrous truth clawing its way out of the abyss. Resurrected beings started to change. Their skin paled, eyes turned cloudy, and veins darkened. The sweet smell of life gave way to a rancid odor that hung in the air like a terrible premonition. The resurrected didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't laugh. They stood in dreadful silence, their empty gazes hinting at a growing hunger. And then the first scream cut through the air, a sound so primal it turned the blood cold. Humanity's newfound joy turned to horror as the resurrected became predators, their yearning for flesh overpowering the remnants of their past selves. Adler watched the horrifying transformation unfold on his screen, the shadows of his lab stretching ominously around him. The man of science who sought to defy death was now confronted with a grim reality. His miracle had birthed monsters. As the night grew darker, Dr. Adler's lab became a lonely island in a sea of impending chaos. His triumph was short-lived, his hope extinguished. Outside his window, the streets filled with a new kind of terror, a nightmarish reality sparked by the Lazarus Strain. The world's beacon of hope had become its harbinger of doom. A grim dusk was descending, and humanity's darkest hour was just beginning. Inside the relentless churn of factory gears and assembly lines, the last vial of Lazarus Strain rolled out. Outside, the once beautiful sunrise now illuminated a world on the brink of a new kind of horror. The air, once filled with the sweet melodies of birds, now echoed with the guttural growls of the resurrected. The scene was set for humanity's fall from grace. Global communications buzzed with warnings and pleas for help. Governments that had previously celebrated the Lazarus Strain now denounced it, their optimistic broadcasts replaced by broadcasts of chaos and dread. Despite this, people clung to the edges of hope, whispering prayers into the cold morning air. News of the predatory resurrected spread like wildfire. Families barricaded themselves in homes, shops, and schools, the sound of hammers nailing what a grim symphony of fear. Streets, once bustling, now lay abandoned, surrendered to the hollow-eyed predators that roamed with an insatiable hunger. In the midst of this escalating chaos, 4 unlikely survivors found their paths entwined. A retired soldier, James, his instincts honed by years of service, took charge. Rachel, a schoolteacher turned survivor, provided the group with her resourcefulness. Tom, a conspiracy theorist, added a critical perspective to their plans, and Lucy, a nurse, brought her medical skills and empathy to the group. They gathered in an old, boarded-up diner, the scent of stale coffee and fear permeating the air. Each face was etched with lines of worry, their eyes reflecting the terrifying reality outside. Their hearts beat in unison, 4 strangers united in their quest for survival. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting an eerie glow over the huddled group. "We can't stay here," James stated, his voice steady against the distant groans of the resurrected. "I know a place," Tom interjected, his eyes glinting with a secret knowledge, an old military base, not far from here. "It's secluded and defensible." As they strategized, Rachel scribbled notes, her hand trembling ever so slightly. Lucy listened, her gaze drifting to a first aid kit tucked away in a corner, mentally preparing for the inevitable injuries they'd have to treat. Despite the dread that weighed heavy in their hearts, a sense of determination began to solidify within the group. They were survivors, each carrying the burden of the world's mistake, the Pandora's box that the Lazarus Strain had become. Outside, the city moaned under the weight of its torment. The Lazarus Strain, once hailed as the savior of mankind, had unleashed a monstrous reality. But within the dimly lit diner, a spark of resistance was kindled. The group of survivors stood as a testament to the indomitable human spirit, ready to brave the storm they were forced to weather. The stage was set, the actors poised, and the script of survival ready to unfold. Amid the relentless symphony of horror, their struggle for survival was about to begin. The world had been forced into the shadows of fear, but within the dim light of resistance, hope was ready to flicker once again. The dawn brought with it a creeping silence, the eerie quiet before a storm. The city, once vibrant with life, now lay desolate under the weight of the relentless outbreak. Amidst the rising chaos, the group of survivors huddled together, ready to make their daring escape. James, the retired soldier, took the lead, his stern gaze scanning the deserted streets for signs of the resurrected. His muscular frame, adorned in camouflaged gear, moved with a silent grace, his every step a calculated dance of survival. The soft rustle of his boots against the crumbling asphalt whispered tales of past battles and hard-earned victories. Rachel followed close behind, clutching her makeshift satchel filled with hastily gathered supplies. Her eyes, usually filled with the warmth of a schoolteacher, now held a flicker of fierce determination. Her once colorful summer dress was replaced with practical jeans and a worn-out jacket, symbols of her sudden transition from educator to survivor. Tom, the conspiracy theorist, walked alongside Lucy, the nurse. Tom's usual energetic chatter was replaced with a brooding silence, his mind undoubtedly weaving new theories around the grim reality. Lucy moved with a quiet resilience, her medical bag, now a beacon of hope in the grim darkness, swaying gently with each step. As they maneuvered through the deserted streets, the city whispered its sorrow. Storefronts, once bustling with activity, stood vacant, their shattered windows reflecting the grim reality. The familiar scent of fresh-baked bread and morning coffee was replaced by a metallic tang of fear that hung in the air, a grim testament to humanity's fall. Every creak of a loose shutter, every whisper of the wind sent pulses of adrenaline surging through their veins. The once familiar landscape now held unknown terrors, every shadow a potential threat. But despite the escalating dread, the group pressed on, their faces set with a grim determination. Suddenly, a guttural growl echoed through the silence. A resurrected being staggered into view, its hollow gaze locked onto the group. Its skin, a sickly pale, stretched over protruding bones, a grotesque parody of the human form. James moved swiftly, his years of combat training springing to life. A single clean shot echoed through the air, dropping the creature in its tracks. The group exchanged a brief look of silent understanding, their worst fears confirmed. The world outside had changed, and so had they. Pressing forward, they disappeared into the labyrinth of deserted streets, leaving the fallen creature behind. Their path was now set, the grim reality of their situation sinking in. The world was no longer a place of hope and dreams. It was a battlefield, and they were its reluctant soldiers. The journey had just begun, and only survival mattered in the terrifying game of life and death they were forced to play. After a tense journey through the city's labyrinthine streets, the group of survivors finally reached their destination, a sprawling, abandoned military base known as the Fortress. Enclosed by towering concrete walls and overgrown barbed wire, it loomed against the ominous sky, a forgotten relic of a world that once was. James moved to unlock the rusted gate, its heavy groan a grating serenade to their arrival. Stepping inside, they were greeted by an eerie silence, the empty barracks and deserted training fields seemingly frozen in time. Tom led them through the base, his boots crunching against the gravel as they made their way towards the main bunker. He moved with a purpose, his earlier reticence replaced with a hint of excitement. "Always knew this place would come in handy one day," he murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips. Lucy walked beside Rachel, their shared silence a comforting balm in the unfolding chaos. The nurse's fingers occasionally brushed against the worn fabric of her medical bag, her thoughts undoubtedly on the potential injuries they might have to treat. Inside the bunker, the air was cool and stale, tainted with the faint, musty scent of abandonment. Long, shadowed corridors stretched out before them, their overhead lights long extinguished. Echoes of past soldiers seemed to linger in the air, the whispers of forgotten stories etched into the cold concrete walls. Together, they ventured into their new sanctuary, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the fortress. They chose an open area with ample light filtering in from the grime-covered windows as their main base. Rachel and Lucy set about cleaning and arranging their gathered supplies while James and Tom performed a security check. The oppressive silence of the fortress was occasionally punctuated by the distant, guttural groans of the resurrected. Each sound was a chilling reminder of the nightmarish reality outside their walls, an invisible specter that threatened their fragile peace. As daylight began to fade, the group gathered around a makeshift fire in the heart of their bunker. The flickering flames painted dancing shadows against the concrete walls, their warm glow a stark contrast to the icy dread that had settled in their hearts. In the heart of the chaos outside, the fortress stood as a beacon of resilience, its cold, concrete walls now a sanctuary against the horrifying onslaught. In their shared struggle, the group found a semblance of hope, their survival intertwined amidst the unfolding apocalypse. The first night in the fortress was one of guarded relief. Each sound outside the walls set their hearts pounding, but inside, they were safe. The world had turned into a haunting playground of the resurrected, but within their concrete sanctuary, the survivors held onto their fading sliver of humanity. In the looming darkness, the 4 survivors huddled closer, the flickering firelight illuminating their determined faces. They were united in their struggle, bound by the grim reality that the world outside had imposed. As the first night in the fortress drew to a close, they steeled themselves for the uncertain days that lay ahead. Their fight for survival had only just begun. The fortress bore the brunt of time, its solemn silence interrupted by the everyday survival activities of the group. James was the first to rise each day, his routine of checking the perimeter a grounding ritual amidst the relentless chaos. His hardened gaze softened each time it fell on the group, his newfound responsibility awakening a protective instinct within him. Rachel filled her hours by organizing their supplies, her deft fingers transforming the grim bunker into a semblance of a home. Her previous life as a schoolteacher was visible in the way she brought order to their confined world, a quiet strength in her determination to sustain some normalcy. Tom spent long hours scanning radio frequencies, his ears straining to catch any hint of other survivors. The crackle and hiss of static was a constant companion in his solitary vigil. Yet, beneath his furrowed brow, a glimmer of hope persisted, a desperate belief in the resilience of humanity. Lucy, with her caring demeanor and tireless dedication, attended to the minor scrapes and injuries. The cool bunker air carried the faint scent of antiseptic, an unspoken testament to her unwavering commitment to their well-being. One particular evening, as they huddled around their makeshift fire, a silence heavier than their daily routine fell upon the group. The flickering shadows danced upon their weary faces, their minds grappling with the reality that had been forced upon them. "We played God," Tom finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, breaking the hushed stillness. His statement hung in the air, a bitter truth they had been avoiding. "What do you mean?" Lucy asked, her brows furrowing in thought. "We defied nature," James echoed, his gaze fixated on the leaping flames. "We tried to conquer death. This," he gestured vaguely to their surroundings, "is our punishment." Rachel sat quietly, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. After a pause, she asked, "But wasn't it for the right cause? To save lives? But at what cost, Rachel?" James retorted, his voice heavy with regret. "We saved them, only to turn them into monsters." The bunker echoed with their silent contemplation. Outside, the world was in the throes of a monstrous nightmare, a grim result of mankind's defiance against the laws of nature. Inside the safety of the fortress, the group confronted the moral implications of their actions, their reflections a stark reminder of the devastating consequences. The once vibrant glow of the fire seemed to dim under the weight of their realization. As the night deepened, each one retreated into their thoughts, their hearts wrestling with the cruel irony of their situation. In their quest to defy death, they had birthed a horror beyond their wildest imaginations. The haunting question lingered in the air, its answer lost amidst the groans of the resurrected and the crackle of their dying fire. Had their defiance been worth the horrifying price they now paid? In the grim confines of the fortress, humanity's hubris was laid bare. As sleep claimed the weary survivors, their dreams were haunted by the monstrous consequence of their actions. The Lazarus Strain, once their beacon of hope, was now a horrifying symbol of their grave mistake. As days blurred into nights and nights into days, a semblance of routine settled within the walls of the fortress. Survival was a constant battle, and every dawn brought with it a fresh set of challenges. But a new threat was brewing beyond their fortified walls, growing with every passing hour, a horde of resurrected. One fateful evening, as Tom scanned the static-filled frequencies of his radio, he picked up an indistinct warning of a migrating horde. His usually calm demeanor faltered, his fingers gripping the worn-out dial, the faint whisper of an impending threat echoing in his ears. The news hit their bunker like a physical blow, their routine disrupted by the looming danger. James immediately went into tactical mode, his soldier instincts taking over as he detailed out defense strategies. "We need to reinforce the entrances and keep a lookout," he stated, his tone stern, his gaze hard. Rachel, ever the resourceful one, started to gather anything that could be used for barricades. A once organized bunker turned into a flurry of activity, the ominous threat fueling their desperate actions. Lucy, caught in the chaos, scrambled to secure their medical supplies. As she worked, her mind raced with horrific possibilities. She knew all too well the damage these resurrected could inflict and the limited resources they had to combat it. As the evening gave way to a tense night, the fortress transformed from a sanctuary into a battle station. The once faint scent of rust and cold concrete was now punctuated by the sharp tang of fear, hanging heavy in the bunker's air. Their night was spent in anxious anticipation, the mere thought of the horde injecting a fresh surge of adrenaline into their veins. The otherwise tranquil silence of the bunker was shattered by the constant shuffling of feet and hushed discussions. In the heart of the night, a chilling sound pierced the silence, a distant, guttural groan echoing across the barren landscape. The horde was upon them. Every following groan was a haunting symphony of their impending doom, a monstrous chorus building up to their terrifying reality. With every ounce of their courage, the group stood steadfast, ready to confront the approaching nightmare. The fortress, once their refuge, was now their battleground, the last standing testament of their survival. The horde was coming, and as the first glimmer of dawn seeped into the desolate world, their fight for survival was about to reach its breaking point. Their darkest hour was upon them, the grotesque echo of the resurrected a grim serenade to their impending battle. As the first light of dawn splintered through the gloomy sky, the cacophony of the horde swelled to a deafening roar. The distant echo transformed into a monstrous reality as the grotesque mass of resurrected bodies swarmed towards the fortress. With adrenaline pounding in their veins, James, Rachel, Tom, and Lucy held their ground. Their lives had been reduced to this terrifying moment, a raw struggle for survival against the nightmare they had inadvertently spawned. James fired the first shot, the echoing blast cutting through the guttural chorus of the horde. His combat-honed instincts led his actions, each targeted bullet temporarily thinning the grotesque mass. But for each resurrected that fell, another took its place, an unending wave of terror. Rachel, her fingers trembling, held onto a makeshift Molotov cocktail. With a nod from James, she lit the rag and lobbed it towards the horde. The ensuing burst of flames carved a path of destruction, the devouring fire reflected in her wide eyes. Tom, huddled inside with Lucy, relayed the horde's progress to James and Rachel. His usually verbose demeanor was replaced by terse updates, each word fueling the rising tension within the bunker. Lucy, her heart pounding, tended to their minor injuries. Her hands moved mechanically, dressing wounds and offering words of comfort. The once soothing scent of antiseptic now smelled like a grim reminder of their desperate situation. But despite their valiant efforts, the fortress began to falter under the relentless assault. The barricades groaned and creaked, each sound a chilling reminder of their impending doom. The resilient concrete walls, once their saviors, were reduced to crumbling barriers against the unyielding force of the horde. In the chaos, a resurrected managed to breach their defenses, its grotesque form emerging from the smoke and rubble. In the ensuing struggle, Tom was gravely injured, his screams echoing off the concrete walls. Despite Lucy's frantic efforts, they could not stem the tide of his rapidly fading life. As he drew his last breath, his grip on reality slipping, his last words were a hoarse whisper, "Survive." In the heart of the catastrophe, the remaining survivors regrouped, grief-stricken yet unyielding. Their stronghold was no more, their sanctuary turned battlefield. As the last line of defense crumbled, James made the call to retreat. The survivors, carrying the weight of their grief and the urgency of their survival, escaped into the labyrinth of the city, leaving behind the ruins of the fortress. Their safe haven had fallen, their fight for survival becoming even more desperate. The fall of the fortress was a grim reminder of their situation. Each lost life was a stark testament to their harrowing reality, a grim toll of the relentless horror. As they disappeared into the skeletal city, the horrifying truth echoed in their hearts. The world they knew was gone, swallowed by the terrifying aftermath of the Lazarus Strain. The skeletal remains of the city stood hauntingly against the scarlet sky as dusk descended. The survivors, driven from their refuge and thrown into the lion's den, moved stealthily among the shadows. The fortress, their haven amidst the chaos, was now nothing more than a distant echo of safety. Grief-stricken yet resolute, James led the retreat, his soldier's instinct navigating them through the perilous cityscape. His hardened gaze scanned their path, every rustle and shadow a potential threat. Each corner turned was a step into the unknown, a dance on the razor's edge of survival. Rachel and Lucy followed, their hearts heavy with the loss of Tom. Despite the biting cold, a sheen of sweat glistened on their foreheads, their nerves wired with adrenaline. Their world had been reduced to fleeting shadows and the constant, guttural echo of the resurrected. Navigating through the winding alleyways, they finally found shelter in a derelict warehouse. Its rusted metal structure groaned under the weight of years, a hollow echo in the sprawling desolation. Its chilling interior, punctuated by the sharp scent of rust and damp earth, became their new refuge. As they settled, the grim reality of their situation set in. Every echoing growl of the resurrected was a haunting serenade to their fallen sanctuary, each rustle a ghostly whisper of the friend they had lost. Yet, in the face of despair, they found a new determination kindling within them. Lucy, her hands steady despite her tumultuous emotions, treated their wounds. The soft glow from a salvaged flashlight bathed her face, casting long shadows that flickered with her movements. Her whispered words of comfort were a balm against their raw grief, a gentle anchor in the rising storm. Meanwhile, Rachel and James secured their perimeter, their actions a synchronized dance born of necessity. The eerie silence was occasionally broken by their hushed conversations, their voices a comforting human presence amidst the inhuman dread. In the heart of their new sanctuary, the survivors found a glimmer of resilience. They were battered, but not broken, scared, but not defeated. Each breath was a testament to their will to survive, each heartbeat a defiant stand against the nightmarish reality. As the night deepened, they huddled together, their shared silence echoing louder than any spoken words. Their grieving hearts found solace in their shared struggle, their determination solidifying in the face of loss. The world outside was a monstrous symphony of the Lazarus Strain's horror. Yet, within the cold, metal walls of the warehouse, hope endured. They were survivors, navigating the treacherous landscape of a reality-turned-nightmare. Their path was laden with danger, their destination unknown. But with every step, they were writing a tale of resilience, a story of survival that echoed louder than the relentless horror. Their journey into the fray was only just beginning. In the heart of desolation, the sun rose, casting long shadows across the scarred cityscape. The eerie silence of dawn was broken by the groans of the resurrected, a grim serenade to the emerging day. Within the cold confines of their new refuge, the survivors stirred. The warehouse, with its rusted rafters and musty scent, bore silent witness to their struggle. The unforgiving reality of their world pressed heavily against the frail walls, a constant reminder of the lurking horror. Rachel, weary yet determined, started organizing their meager supplies. Her once radiant schoolteacher's smile had given way to a hardened resolve, a testament to her relentless spirit. Each passing day sculpted new lines of resilience on her face, the unfolding chaos molding her into a survivor. James, his soldier's instincts in full throttle, surveyed their surroundings. His gaze was a sharp blade, slicing through the misty morning, vigilant for signs of danger. Every decision, every plan was a chess move against the lurking horror, a tactical dance against their monstrous enemy. Lucy, nursing a cup of scavenged coffee, patched up their wounds. Her once comforting infirmary had transformed into a field station, her medical supplies dwindling with each passing day. Yet, her nurturing spirit remained unbroken, a beacon of warmth amidst the icy fear. Their new routine was a tightrope walk between hope and despair, a delicate balance in the face of unending terror. Each passing moment was a testament to their will to survive, their hearts beating a steady rhythm of defiance against the nightmarish symphony outside. When a desperate call for help echoed across their radio, the survivors felt a surge of purpose. Tom's memory was a fuel, igniting a flame of resistance within them. Rachel, her voice filled with newfound determination, answered the call, their coordinates a beacon for any fellow survivors. As the day faded into night, the survivors sat huddled together, their shared silence a comforting blanket against the creeping dread. The world outside was a monstrous playground, the resurrected its unwilling players. Yet, within the confines of the warehouse, a spark of resistance was kindling. The dawn of their resistance had begun. With every answered call, every saved life, they were scripting a tale of survival. The Lazarus Strain had plunged the world into a nightmarish reality, but within the heart of the chaos, the human spirit persisted. The journey was far from over, the destination unknown, but the survivors stood defiant against the encroaching darkness. Their tale was a testament to the indomitable will of humanity, a beacon against the monstrous backdrop of the Lazarus Strain. Amidst the relentless horror, the survivors clung to hope, their resistance a resounding echo against the haunting silence. Their struggle continued, their hearts beating a steady rhythm of defiance, a haunting melody of survival against the monstrous symphony of the resurrected. We have walked through the shadowed lanes of fear tonight, dear listeners, tasted the bitter dread, and witnessed the chilling dance of the resurrected. As we leave the haunting echoes of the Lazarus Strain behind us, remember that every creak in the silence of the night, every rustle in the darkness, is a reminder of our journey. Until next time, keep your imagination alight, and remember, our world is but a stage for our scary stories. Good night, sleep tight, and let the moonlight guard your dreams against the night's creeping horrors. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.